Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Wealth Building for Dummies podcast. My name is Kyle Demian. I'm here as always with Renji Matthew, and today we are talking about how California wants to come out with a $50 minimum wage law to make the minimum wage across all businesses and all sectors be $50 an hour. We're going to talk about our thoughts on it, what could potentially happen if this does go into effect and how it could affect small and large businesses, not only just in California, but potentially all across the country as well. So, Renji, if you want to get us started, what were your initial thoughts when you first saw this article and we sent this to each other?
Well, everything's going to cost a lot more. That was the very first initial thought. We think inflation is bad now. It's going to be a lot worse, right? And something that also we started talking about is Venezuela and all the stuff that happened there. And we can go into that a little bit if you want, unless you had something else you wanted to start with.
Well, no, let's, if you want to, let's start by talking about that. What happened in Venezuela?
Yeah, so at one point, Venezuela used to be one of the wealthiest countries in South America due to their vast oil reserves, right? So around 2010s, hyperinflation happened in Venezuela where inflation rates were in the millions percentage annually. Can you imagine that? Like we have people here having a hard time just inflation being at 7 or 8%. Could you imagine inflation rates being going up annually millions of percentages? That's crazy, right? What that caused in Venezuela is rapid erosion of their currency value. And with that, basic goods became extremely scarce and unaffordable for regular citizens. And prices essentially skyrocketed for a daily basis. Like they couldn't even afford daily living needs because of skyrocketing prices. And what that caused is widespread poverty, food shortages, triggering mass immigration for people trying to find better living conditions outside of the country. And that collapsed the public services and infrastructure due to lack of funds and resources. So that's just one example. I think there's other countries that we've seen this happen with. Venezuela is just the one that came to my mind because that was one of the more recent conversations we've had. But could you imagine if something like that happened here in America? Right. And yeah. I feel like this one thing they're trying to pass in California is only a small start. Hopefully it's not, but it could be a small start to going toward that trajectory. Right. Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts?
Well, from the article that we were reading, and it's published by Forbes, one of the reasons I think they're trying to do it is because there's a statistic that a family of 4 needs $127,000 to survive in the San Francisco Bay Area, which is one of the highest costs of living all across the country. California already has notoriously high state taxes and just a high cost of living, especially in some of the largest areas like San Francisco and Los Angeles. It's just simply not cheap. So they're trying to come up with solutions and ways to help their citizens, right? But I just don't think the $50 minimum wage is it. And the reason I say that is in the marketplace, in a capitalistic society, which we're in, you are paid based on the value and the skills that you can bring to the table for your position, for your job, for your business, right? For example, if you're a cashier at a grocery store, there is not as much skill that is required for that position compared to an accountant, for an example. Right. And so what if an accountant is making $35 an hour where the cashier right now is making, I'm not even sure what the minimum wage is in California. I think they just bumped it to like $20 an hour, if I'm not mistaken. But what if that cashier is making $20 an hour now? Accountants make $35 an hour, but all of a sudden minimum wage gets boosted to $50 an hour. That accountant is going to want to then get paid a proportionate amount above $50 an hour, right? 65, 70. Otherwise, if he could do the work of an accountant or go be a cashier and make $50 an hour compared to his 35 that he was making as an accountant, he'd probably rather go do that if it's going to be, to them easier work, right? So it just creates so many different problems with the wages of everybody else would need to increase as well. And
Go up.
economics 101, companies need to profit, and these costs are going to come from somewhere, whether it's reducing the number of employees, replacing employees with technology or kiosks or, AI, things like that would all come about. And then guess what? Then there's going to be a job shortage, and there's not going to be as many jobs as available for $50 an hour. So I just see so many negatives that could come out of this that I don't see too many positives. On paper, it sounds great. It could be a great way to get votes, but in the long run, I don't think it does too much good for the California economy. And then, of course, there would be other people in other states that would want, to raise the minimum wage too. So what are your thoughts on that, Renji?
Exactly like you just said. It's going to raise income for everybody, but if $50 is the minimum, like you said, everything else has to go up proportionately. Mm-hmm. And if everything else goes up proportionately, for small businesses that need to hire these people, they won't be able to afford. The only way they would be able to afford is if they increase prices on everything. But like you said, eventually jobs are going to have to cut down on how many people they hire, how many employees they have, and they're definitely going to take on more AI or technology to help where they don't need people to cover that. And you're already seeing that with some big industries where they're taking on, I think, so I'm from the medical field, my background, and I've already heard of either pharmacies, some medical clinics having no techs or no nurses that are already having computers doing those jobs, which that's, a small percentage that's doing that. But imagine if they figured out how to do that on a large scale. A lot of the medical field will not need nurses or techs or anything like that. Even in pharmacies, they'll probably just need one pharmacist to manage the high point stuff, but the computer's doing everything. That causes more people not having jobs, right? So if people make these kind of decisions, it's going to make business owners want to take different decisions to cut their costs, to keep profits high, and that's going to cause more people to not have jobs. And like you mentioned before, when if an accountant sees that their income can be just as much as what a cashier's is, that's going to cause him to not become an accountant really anymore, unless his income goes up proportionately. What that's going to cause is less people wanting to sharpen their skills or to grow their skills. So you're encouraging more people to not have to get better, right? Not have to have skills to work a job. And if they do, they're going to have to make way more money to get those jobs too. So again, causing less jobs, more people without jobs. I don't see a lot of benefits of it either, like you said.
And I'm curious, like the stat that they'd given, a family of four would need $127,000 to survive. That's what the current market in the current environment of their wages. Like, what happens if you raise the minimum wage to $50,000? That could maybe double, because these businesses would have to adjust as well. And one more piece of the article that goes hand in hand with what you were just saying about the small businesses being affected more. The minimum wage negatively impacts certain industry sectors more than others, but also disproportionately impacts smaller businesses compared to their larger counterparts. Large corporations are already at an advantage over small businesses in dealing with these cost increases. They tend to have higher margins and are able to absorb the higher labor costs. Companies like Amazon that typically pay higher wages already have actually advocated for a higher minimum wage in the past, knowing the negative impact to their business would be minimal. So exactly what we're talking about, like these large companies would actually just have more power because, it would probably get rid of some of these smaller businesses that are competing with them. So it's interesting that it has, it points out that Amazon is kind of advocating for higher minimum wages, maybe purposely to try to eliminate competition. I mean, it makes sense. But anything else you want to add then to wrap us up for today, Renji?
Yeah, something else that came to my mind too. What are the tax implications of all this too, right? So you mentioned before when politicians try to push these things, they're probably looking at the tax benefits for them, right? Because where are they paid? They're paid through our tax dollars, right? So when you see, oh, if they're going to make $50 more, that means their incomes are going to be higher. That means they're probably going to be in a higher tax bracket. And, the government's going to have to change the tax brackets at that point. But if they didn't, you're at a higher tax bracket. Now you're paying more in taxes, less money in your pockets, more money in their pockets, right? Business owners will hire the CPAs and accountants that they need to help them get out of those tax burdens. But everyday people, everyday citizens don't have that. So they're going to be paying more in taxes too. So it feels like all of these changes are just going to provide more income and leverage for the politicians than anything else, right? It's getting them more votes up front and getting them more income later. But the people are going to suffer. Even though they might not see the problems that's going to arise later, it's going to cause more problems for them because like going back to Venezuela, that's the thing, is they depended too much on one resource instead of diversifying. And this is something we can't hit enough on. Diversify what you're doing, right? We talk about using some accounts over others, but we're not saying not to use all the opportunities that you have out there. Start your business, so you can do your own things. Invest into different things so you can diversify. Don't just put all your money in one place, right? So this goes in that direction too. And that's kind of what happened in Venezuela. And they didn't have a proper infrastructure or financial discipline. And that's what caused more of those problems. And that's what we're seeing here, right? People, especially since COVID, people don't have enough discipline for their finances. They're not budgeting. They're not looking at what's actually coming in, what's going out, and it's causing more problems for them. And on top of that, if all this stuff happens, it's going to cause inflation to go up. It's going to cause those same people to have even more of the same problems because they never had the discipline to set it up the right way to start with. So those are some of the things that went through my mind while you were talking.
Yeah. And I think lastly, if you live in California and you can't afford it, maybe you should leave California, right? Like the cost of living isn't that high everywhere. Or unfortunately, you've got to start a business, do some side hustles. I don't think simply the problem, the way to solve the problem is by increasing minimum wage. It's by, not living above your means and not living in an area where maybe you can't afford. That's the best solution to this and to anything, because $50 minimum wage would not be sustainable to small businesses, let alone to the economy, right? So if you guys are watching, thanks for tuning in. If you like this content and you like learning about money and talking about money, you guys are going to love our Wealth Academy school community that we created. We're going to have the link below this video so you guys can go and join that, where it's got 4 to 5 hours of content from us teaching the basics of how to build wealth and how to be better with your money, because simply enough, we weren't taught about money in school. So it's not your fault, but now it's your responsibility to learn how to use money, how to be smart with money, and how to build wealth. So we created this school community to be able to help others. It's free. There is no cost to join. And we look forward to seeing you guys there and interacting with you guys and helping you build wealth as well. If you have any comments, leave those below. And then also make sure to subscribe to our page and like this video. And we'll see you guys on the next one. Take care.